Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get a hell yeah!
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Party on Broad podcast. The Party on Broad podcast can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Hit that subscribe button, guys, if you're watching us here on YouTube. Joining me today is my man, Rob, our co-host of the Party on Broad podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Philly_Madness. What's going on, Rob?
Vote. I just want everyone to go on Twitter, vote for Team Rob over Team Crockpot over here, okay? The guy, I don't know why he wanted to pin his co-host against him in round one. You know, I thought we were friends. I thought we were great. And he puts us not only on the same side of the bracket, but in the same matchup. So vote for me. Let's get him out, and we'll just keep moving along from there.
Don't listen to anything my man says over here. Don't listen to a damn word this guy just said. Vote for my squad. No, seriously, vote for whoever you think has the best starting lineup. I love it. So we're doing a best starting NBA lineup of all time, and I thought it would be really fun to have some drama between Rob and I on one end in the play-in matchup, and then Jason Blevins and Kyle Carlin on the other end because they're very close friends. So that's what it is, man. So it's, I think, one of the best matchups around because you've got Charles versus Larry Bird. You've got Durant versus Kawhi Leonard. That's a really, really fun matchup. I think my team has much better in terms of modern NBA rules, spacing, pace, length, defense. What's your quick take?
My quick take is Kawhi and Steph are the modern NBA, and Kawhi and Steph Curry are on my squad. So I'm rolling with those two that can literally score from anywhere on the court if they're asked to.
Not when they're defended by Paul George, Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis. So they're going to get locked up.
I'm not Steph. Steph doesn't get – listen, Kawhi is like Turbo Cop. Like he just keeps going. He's a robot. So I'm not worried about anybody covering Kawhi. It just doesn't happen. We're good.
Right. Check out 76ers TPL on Twitter. Cast your vote. Have some fun. We're going to keep rolling with the brackets with the second round after this. But let's talk about today because we have a Redskins expert joining us today. He is Mitch Tischler of NBC Sports Washington. We're going to talk about expectations for the Redskins. We're going to talk about the top storylines for the Washington Redskins. Any quick thoughts on that, Rob?
Just what are that we going to call them next year? Because we don't know what it's going to be, but we know that it's not going to be the Redskins. I mean, obviously, Dwayne Haskins is a guy you want to ask about. And look, I said this right after the draft. Their defensive line is scary good. And that's concerning when you have an offensive line issue like the Eagles do. I'm curious what people down there think of that defensive line.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Thanks for watching. All right, guys. Today we have my man from NBC Sports Washington, one of the hosts of the Redskins Talk podcast. Find his podcast on that NBC Sports Washington YouTube channel, anywhere you find your podcasts. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mitch_Tischler. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks. I always enjoy a little time up in Philly.
Yeah. So today we are talking about expectations for the Washington Redskins and looking at 2020. And we have to start off with the obvious, my man. A lot is changing in the R word world right now. A few days ago, it was reported that the Washington Redskins are going to, not include Native American imagery. They're going to undergo a team name change. Dude, what is the local media saying about everything going down right now?
Get it done. But right now we're in this nebulous world of where everyone's just throwing out all the different possible nicknames. Everyone's debating about what's right and what's wrong and what they should go with or what they shouldn't. We just want them to pick a name so we can kind of move on and get on to talking about actual football, which is what we all want to talk about.
Well, Mitch, real quick to piggyback off of that, is there anything that seems to be the one that you're hearing mostly as a possibility, or is it really just a crapshoot right now?
So there were reports early that they were leaning towards the Washington Warriors. Dan Snyder looked into owning a Arena Football League team probably almost a decade ago now and put in a patent for the Washington Warriors name. So he has some sort of patent towards that. We actually just got off a show with former Redskin, former Viking, Fred Smoot, and he was talking about the Washington Red Wolves, which is kind of an interesting name. There's no other kind of wolf symbolism in the NFL, so it'd be a little bit unique. And he did a deep dive on Red Wolves history, and the red wolf in the United States is an endangered animal, and it apparently lived in this area. So you could keep the HTTR, maybe it would be Howl to the Red Wolves, but you could keep the HTTR, you could keep burgundy and gold-ish colors to kind of give people something to, grasp onto to the past for all the fans that are super upset about the name change. So, I mean, I would say that from a fan side, Red Wolves seems to be the leader in the clubhouse. From the team side / kind of really thinking about it, seems like it's probably going to be Washington Warriors. But honestly, I don't know how you can make an entire team name change and logo and everything that comes with it in 2 months. So I don't know that they're going to be able to start this season with a brand new name and a brand new logo. They might just be the Washington Football Club for the 2020 season and kind of spend the year making sure that what they do is correct, because you don't want to have to make another change later.
All right. Go ahead, Rob.
All right. So let's talk about Dwayne Haskins. He had what would probably be seen as a mediocre rookie year. He ended the year a little bit better, though, than necessarily the way it started. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Do you expect to see that jump from him in year 2, or do you think it might be a little tougher because you're talking about a new coach, new system? Is it another growing year for him?
I think it's certainly a growing year. It's a year that is going to define his career in Washington. He's at a crossroads with a new coach. If he plays well, I think he obviously keeps the job going forward. If he doesn't play well, they're going to be all in on the Trevor Lawrence train, next season. But as far as expectations, I think it's a little unfair to talk about last year because it was kind of a tale of 2 seasons. You had Jay Gruden, who was there, who was coaching for his job, didn't want to draft a quarterback, didn't want to deal with developing a quarterback. He wanted a guy that was there. So that first half of the season, when he got thrown into those games in the second half, he was getting basically no reps in practice. He was getting time in the film room, but he was basically their third stringer in practice, but their second stringer, on the field. So it was really kind of an unfair situation. I think Ron and Scott Turner have both kind of talked about being all in on him. We've seen a huge change in his body. He went from, I think, 235 last year down to like 217 or so, he says, and you can physically see it in his workout videos. He's stronger. He's definitely more defined. And he seems to be embracing the role of QB1, kind of the way that you want your lead QB to be. And I don't know that that's necessarily something that he did last year. So I think, Ron Rivera coming in is a blessing for him. And I think he's going to have every opportunity to thrive this year. And I think he's going to have a good season. I mean, I don't know that he's going to hit any of those gaudy numbers that, Carson Wentz hit in his second year or any of the other, kind of QBs that broke out a little bit more. But I think he's going to prove to be solid, and I think he's going to solidify that job going forward.
Fantastic. So from a roster standpoint, I think one of the main differences I see between Washington and Philadelphia has to be the tight end position. The Eagles are loaded there, man. They got Ertz, they got Goddard. While Washington shockingly passed on the tight end in the 2020 NFL draft, I thought that was a major need. What is Washington's plan there at this position? And fantasy football-wise, is Logan Thomas like the fantasy breakout candidate of this season?
I think Logan Thomas seems to be the guy. They picked up Thaddeus Moss, undrafted free agent out of LSU. I think that he's going to compete for some time, assuming that his the broken foot that they found at the combine, is healed and he's ready to go. It's not a very good position. I would say it's probably one of the poorest staffed positions in the NFL of any team. It's pretty terrible when you look across the board. David Njoku seems like he might be available out of Cleveland. I think they'd be silly not to at least look into that and see what happens. But as we go into camp, Logan Thomas and Thaddeus Moss are going to be the 2 main pass-catching guys that are out there. Jeremy Sprinkle was on the team, for the past couple of seasons, and he's mostly a blocking tight end, and he doesn't catch the ball particularly well. So I don't know that there's a real fantasy option at the tight end position for them. Okay. And believe me, you don't have to remind Redskins fans about the Eagles tight ends, because those 2 guys destroy DC every time they come down here.
The tight end spot for Washington sounds a lot like the Eagles' linebacking core. Total. What? Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I tell you, one position where you guys found a diamond in the rough was the wide receiver position with Terry McLaurin last year. Over 900 yards, 7 TDs. The guy kind of came out of nowhere. I know he scorched the Eagles a couple times, I remember correctly. What are your takes on him as he enters year 2? He seems like the guy that has the tools to become that number 1. What do you think?
He is a superstar in the making.
Wow.
Yeah.
Aside from everything that he does on the field, the way that he carries himself off it, we joke all the time with him last year. He's like a 10-year veteran. He speaks well to the media. He stays after practice and catches balls. You see him working out early. You see him staying late. He watches film. He's always got his head, in the right spot. He is a star to come. And you guys signed Darius Slay. Mm-hmm. And when the Redskins played the Lions last year, McLaurin went for, I think, almost 100 yards, and Slay afterwards said that was the best receiver that he saw up to that point in that season. So, I think that kind of speaks for itself. You saw him, torch some pretty good DBs and get open, and that's with all of the crap that the Redskins threw at quarterback last year. So you can only imagine another year in the system, a chance to really meld with Dwayne, and they've been working out a lot this offseason. I think that he's going to be a breakout, potential all-pro, maybe not next year, maybe 2 years from now, but he's a guy that the NFC East is going to hate to see for a while.
So you hear that, Chris? They get Terry McLaurin. We got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside out of that draft. Really? I call it even.
Yeah. A lot of pressure.
Arcega-Whiteside is supposed to be just a great route runner, and he's supposed to get open all the time.
Oh, good God.
What a nightmare. Oh, my God, that guy is terrible. All right, let's move on to the defensive line, dude. Quick shout out to my guy, Matt Ioannidis. I went to Temple. I love that guy from my Temple Owls. But one of my favorite picks from this draft was Chase Young. Dude, I'm really liking your front seven, guys. So, what is your expectation from Chase Young, and is he going to make an immediate impact in 2020?
He is. I want to ask you a little bit about Matt Ioannidis in a second, but he is going to make an immediate impact. Is he going to be like the Bosa brothers? Hopefully, but I think that's pretty lofty expectations. He's a guy that the Ryan Day, the Ohio State head coach, talked about being probably a more impressive physical specimen than either of the Bosa brothers. So I think with him on one side, first round pick last year, Montez Sweat on the other, Ryan Kerrigan, kind of the wily veteran who's been there, done that with everything. And then you have the 2 first round picks in Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. So, you really have a ton of early draft picks, young early draft picks up front. To me, they can be one of the best 3 front 4s, front 5s in the NFL. If the Redskins are going to be successful at all in 2020, it's going to be because those guys absolutely dominate. And so, Matt Ioannidis, tell me, what was he like in college? Was he a stud in college? Like, did you expect that he was going to be this good?
No, not at all. But Matt Ioannidis, came from the school of Matt Rule, and you know how big Matt Rule is now in the NFL. He's essentially bringing the Temple Owls south. He's bringing pretty much everybody from Temple to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm loving it. But when you think of Matt Ioannidis, that guy is tough as nails, man. That guy was one of the single biggest favorite moments of my life, which was when Temple beat Penn State for the first time. Like, they crushed him, and they sacked Christian Sackenberg like 11 times in that game. So
we can all agree it's always good when Penn State loses.
Yes. Boom.
I can't agree. I'm on the other side of that one.
I'm a Maryland guy. I went to Maryland, so that's we know where I'm coming from. I picked Matt Ioannidis to lead the team in sacks this year because I think that even with the Chase Young and Montez Sweat guys on the outside, I think there's going to be a lot of rotation with Ryan Anderson and Ryan Kerrigan as well. So I think Ioannidis is going to get the double-digit sacks this year and could get to 12, 13 sacks. These guys are going to be going after the quarterback way more than they did last year, and Jack Del Rio is going to be a huge difference for them up front.
Just the heart and soul of Temple's defense that year. That guy is just a rock. I love that guy.
Awesome.
Well, listen, I agree. I said it shortly after the draft that the front 7 of the Washington Redskins is frankly scary. I think is the word to use, which is something they're going to need, right? Because the secondary has been a little topsy-turvy. In the safety position, I'm looking at, you have Landon Collins there. You know he's a talented kid. Who do you have penciled in, or who do you think takes that other safety spot to help out in the back end?
I think Sean Davis is a perfect complement to Landon Collins. Landon is not an inside-the-box safety, but he does great when he's at the line of scrimmage. And Sean Davis is really more of the guy that likes to play center field and can get after the ball. Obviously, he was hurt most of last year in Pittsburgh, so you're hoping that he's coming back from injuries. The one thing that you see across the Redskins from this offseason was they signed a bunch of guys to short-term deals, one-year deals for the most part. And, Ron Rivera is really wanting it to be show-me season for a lot of guys. And certainly for Sean Davis, that's the big step for him. DeShazer Everett is another guy who will get a little playing time. He's been in D.C. for a while. He's a special team stalwart, so he's not going anywhere. But he'll be able to fill in and maybe challenge Sean Davis for that starting secondary role. But I think both of those guys will be upgrades over Monte Nicholson, who was their other starting safety last year, who was a little bit more of a wild card. So a lot of the Redskins secondary safety and corner problems were miscommunication and whatnot, and I think a lot of that stemmed from a few key guys who aren't there this year, who were kind of not on the same playbook last year.
Yeah, let's stay to that defensive backfield. Let's talk about cornerback. Washington appears to be very thin there. That seems to be like one of the biggest question marks on this roster. You got Kendall Fuller coming in. You got ex-Eagle Ronald Darby coming in. I think we saw his backside more than his front side. All that. What a frustrating player. What are your thoughts and expectations for the Redskins cornerback position?
I mean, the two weakest spots on the Redskins team are tight end and corner.
Okay.
You hope that Kendall Fuller can step in and be, your lockdown number one corner. I think that he's really good, and I think he'll be solid. I just don't know that the rest of the corners there's anybody in there that's really worthwhile. They kind of gave Fabian Moreau a shot on the outside last year. He started the year playing mostly the nickel corner spot, but they gave him a shot on the outside, and he had some really strong moments and some really bad moments. I think there's going to be an expectation that he's going to be better. Maybe Ronald Darby will be healthy / better than he was up in Philly. But, I mean, after that, you're really not working with a whole lot. Jimmy Moreland will be there, slot corner. I mean, they call him Jimmy effing Moreland because he just during practices and training camp all last year, he would have a pick a day. He's solid, I think, as a slot corner. I just don't know if he's big enough or good enough to play on the outside. But man, that position is super weak. And you talked about the draft. I can't believe that they didn't address it, particularly in the draft, because that was somewhere that just felt like they had to do it.
You may want to pass along to the coaching staff that if any team runs a fly route against Ronald Darby, you're in trouble. So make sure that there's help behind them. And even if Darby looks like he's there, he's not there. He's just not there.
You remember Josh Norman played corner for the Redskins last year, so
probably going to be a very similar situation. But, all right, let's go back to the other side of the ball. On the offensive line, the Trent Williams saga is over. That crowd is no longer covering them. But especially with a guy like Dwayne Haskins, that offensive line has a very important job, as everyone does in the NFL, to protect the quarterback. What are your feelings with the offensive line, and who becomes that new left tackle for the Washington Redskins?
I think you got to look at the fourth rounder that they drafted this year, Sadiq Charles, another kid from LSU. Actually, he and Thaddeus Moss are pretty tight, but he started at left tackle for the best offensive football team in college football, for the number one overall pick, for an offensive line that won the award for the best O-line in college football last year. So he dropped in the draft because he had some issues at LSU staying on the field because of off-the-field problems or whatever. Most of those problems that he ran into at LSU, the new CBA kind of took care of in the NFL, so he doesn't have to worry about getting suspended for that sort of failed drug test anymore as much. So I think that he's going to be able to step in. That the plan is, I think it's Sadiq Charles' job until he proves he's not ready. And I think the biggest thing that they talked about with him coming out of college was they wanted him to put on a little more weight, get a little stronger. He's had a weird offseason in this COVID world, so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes in. The other guy they had there is Cornelius Lucas, who was in Chicago last year. He is a mammoth of a man. He's 7'5", 385 pounds.
Wow.
He's just huge. So he's one of those guys that you can slot in. I think, kind of like Big V for you guys last year, you can feel kind of confident that you put in a dude who's as big as he is, that he'll be able to, at least slow down some guys.
Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
You see that when your team drafts offensive linemen who can play right away, even if you get them in the fourth round, instead of taking Andre Dillard, who we still don't know if he should be on the field this year, that we might bring back the 65-year-old Jason Peters to solidify us at that left tackle. Mitch, you'll learn pretty quickly that I have been very angry about this year's draft and the usage of picks.
I can tell.
I haven't picked up on that yet.
Listen, the Redskins have had a lot of bad drafts as of late. So I feel your pain. I mean, Terry McLaurin was a great hit, last year, but there have been some empty calories there in DC for a while.
Yeah, and the Eagles are paying for it salary cap wise, especially now and in the future. So the Eagles draft has been awful. That Sadiq Charles, Andre Dillard situation, that is definitely one of the top storylines. I'm going to be watching that closely because Andre Dillard, one of the biggest, most vital pieces to the Eagles' success in 2020. Let's talk about your way too early win prediction. And what would you constitute a successful season for the Washington Redskins?
I think 6 wins is successful. I think you double it up from last year. I think last year the train got off the tracks a little bit during the middle of the season with Jay Gruden and everything that happened, with his firing and whatnot. So I think, you have a much more, competent head coach, a more competent offensive coordinator, and a more competent defensive coordinator. I think can make a huge difference. Last year, the Redskins' first game of the season was at the Eagles. That first half was the best part of the season for us. And honestly, the game ended and we were doing our podcast post-game, and one of our other guys, JP Finley, said, this might be the highlight of the season. And I was like, get out of here. Like, it was a loss at the end. Lo and behold, it was by far the highlight. So I think if they can double their win total, I think that's a nice step forward, and you can kind of set yourself up. I mean, honestly, like I said earlier when we were talking about Dwayne, everything matters about Dwayne Haskins. If he's good, they can get to 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 wins in a crazy world. If he's bad, they're back at 2, 3 wins again, and they're going quarterback shopping.
Awesome. Go ahead, Rob. You got one more? You good?
My only question to you, and I've kind of, wanted to ask all people covering teams with new coaches is, with this offseason, with this COVID-19 and everything's virtual, how much of a it's a challenge for everybody, but when you're a new coach, a new regime, are you seeing the things seem like they're going okay, or can you tell, like covering the team as you do, that there's major challenges that you don't know if they're going to be able to get them answered by the time the season starts?
I think a little bit of both. There are major challenges. I think the biggest thing is going to be how they handle the preseason, how they handle training camp and the preseason. Yeah. If they get to training camp and they know, they're either A, playing games, or B, not playing games, they can use that time, effectively. But if you start starting training camp, planning on playing 2 games, and then they get canceled midway through training camp, it makes things difficult. If there are no games, you can spend the first week or 2 doing OTAs and walkthroughs and kind of treating it like you would have the earlier part of the offseason, and then transition into training camp like you and I know, training camp is. So I think as long as they kind of have an idea of, what they're going to do for that month before the first game of the season, they'll be able to tailor, those practices to what these guys need. I mean, with a new coaching staff, usually the biggest issue is learning the playbook and having enough time to, study it and learn, all the nuances to it. I think in the Zoom world, you can almost think of it as a positive, because they're getting extra time in the playbook and extra time with the coaches going over plays and learning all the different things about them. So, I think there's kind of different ways to look at it, but as long as, whatever happens with the preseason games is set before training camp does, they should be good to go.
All right, last question, and I got to ask. So you're outside of the city. You have an outside perspective. There's nothing more divisive in Philadelphia than the quarterback position. What's your take on Carson Wentz, and any advantages, disadvantages you see on how Washington matches up with the Philadelphia Eagles?
I mean, the biggest advantage for the Redskins is going to be their defensive front, right? The Eagles' O-line was questionable before and is even more so now with injuries and whatnot. And that's the way that they're going to win games. The Redskins are going to win games is those guys getting after the quarterback. Wentz has been a thorn in the Redskins' side since he got there. I think he's a star. He just has to be able to stay healthy, which is a huge if. Kirk Cousins, when he was in D.C., is not as good of a quarterback as Carson Wentz is, but he was on the field for every single play of every game. And so from that regards, I would almost take Kirk over Carson. But if Carson's healthy and playing a full season, man, I mean, you guys know how good he is. Hopefully Dwayne Haskins is 80% of Carson Wentz. But again, he's got to be healthy. What are you doing? Who's your backup quarterback?
Oh God, Jalen Hurts, man. All right, so that was one of the draft picks heard around the world. That second round pick by the Eagles was Jalen Hurts, and Rob and I went on a rant for over an hour on how much we hated that pick and made I brought on a lot of Philly talent in the media, and they're still scratching their heads about this pick. Go ahead, Rob.
Are they gonna? Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say my issue with the pick was this, right? When you look at the first and second round of an NFL draft, you need guys that can contribute. So you've put yourself in a really bad situation here because you're telling us, no, Carson's our guy. All right, well, then you wasted your second round pick on a guy who, if all goes well with the Philadelphia Eagles, never plays for you, right? Because that means Carson's healthy and you're winning games and you're not going to replace him. To me, there were too many needs for the Eagles. We talked about linebacker, safety, offensive line, you name it. To be honest with you, you could have picked the second wide receiver, and I would have been okay with it.
I was going to ask, how do we feel about Jalen Reagor?
Yeah, well, we're split here. Chris is in love with him and has been since January.
I called the pick in January.
I wanted Justin Jefferson in that moment. I understand the whole always a slot receiver, but you talked about Sadiq Charles on LSU. Well, Jefferson didn't drop a pass and caught a lot of touchdowns on the best team in college football last year. So, but we'll see. But it's just, to me, they did not need to pick their backup quarterback at the second pick. To me, that's something they could have done. And the way some of those quarterbacks fell, you could have made that move then and addressed the position of need that you could have filled with a guy that can play right away. The Eagles have every draft pick as a question mark, in my opinion, this year. There's not one that I look at and say he's ready on day one. I can't say that about any of them.
So are you guys out on Nate Sudfeld?
No, I think that guy.
He was in DC. He was in DC before he came to Philly.
Yeah.
He's a great dude. I hope he succeeds at some point. I just don't know if he's ever going to get a chance to be on the field now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I look at Nate. I think it's weird. I think the Eagles are going to dress 3 quarterbacks because of the expanded roster this year.
Yeah.
So, Doug has said for right now that Nate's probably their second string. We'll see what happens in a situation, knock on wood, where they need a second string.
Yep.
But, I think he's a good dude. I know Carson loves him in the QB room. But you're right. I just don't know if he's ever going to get that opportunity to be a starter somewhere.
I definitely see him as second string in a regular season, in a regular world where, Jalen Hurts can get on the field, get his reps, learn the playbook. I could see Jalen Hurts being a real impact player for the Eagles offense, but Nate Sudfeld enters his 4th year. He knows the playbook. The Eagles are definitely going to rely on him over Jalen Hurts, I think, at least to start. I see Jalen Hurts ramping up as the season progresses. But I mean, Nate Sudfeld is Nate Sudfeld. I mean, no one has like really high expectations for him. This guy is just a career backup. Any last?
I think he's the perfect option if teams decide they're going to quarantine one quarterback in case COVID starts running through. Nate Sudfeld is the perfect guy to, join via Zoom for all the meetings and practice and stuff like that, and be your kind of in case stuff happens guy.
I like it.
Yeah, man. All right. Make sure you follow my man Mitch on Twitter at Mitch_Tischler. Check out the Redskins Talk podcast. Check that out over at NBC Sports Washington's YouTube channel. Wherever you find your pods. Thanks for joining, Mitch.
Appreciate you guys. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks, man. Come on some other time when we match up, man. During the season. It'd be a blast.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, dude.
Sixers win it! Wow! Oh man, Embiid just posterized Russell Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me get it.